Oh, let me tell you something. Bustin' makes me feel good.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Blockbusting, the podcast where we love to hate the movies. I am your host, Jay Light. Joining me today, Ben Rosen.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Happy to have you. We've been circling doing this for over a year. This is the longest I've ever waited and been able to finally land a guest. So I'm glad I locked you down, dude.
Well, I'm so glad we waited also because my initial choice for doing this show was National Treasure, which is a movie that you hold in very high esteem. And I didn't, for the sake of, avoiding any sort of conflict, I'm glad we waited. 2020 has been a wild ride.
Oh, yeah.
I just launched a podcast and I thought I should reach out to Jay again and pick a different movie. Let's get into something that I truly, truly despise.
Yes, and this is a movie I remember when it came out. It was controversial for various reasons, and I'm sure we'll get into all those reasons, but this is Clint Eastwood's 2008 film, Gran Torino.
Yes, and I'll be honest, I had not seen it until I reached back out to you and I said, I still really want to do the podcast. Let me think about what movie I should do. And I opened up Netflix, and there aren't a lot of movies that I hate, truly. There are a couple that I strongly dislike that have already been covered on this podcast, La La Land and The Last Jedi. But I opened up Netflix, and I saw Gran Torino, and I thought, let me give this a shot, and holy shit, it did not disappoint.
So, yeah, what was your experience like watching this movie? Because if you didn't see it in theaters, I would imagine it's a very different experience. You were mentioning beforehand that you had friends of yours who were very divided opinion-wise on this movie.
Yeah, I had remembered when it came out, and I guess for whatever reason, I wasn't interested in seeking it out. And I'm not really a big Clint Eastwood fan. And over the past several years, I've watched more of his movies. At that point, I don't think I'd seen many of his films in 2008 when it came out. So I didn't feel either way about Clint. So I was like, I don't need to see this. I'll wait. And since then, I've seen Mystic River, seen American Sniper, seen Invictus, seen Richard Jewell and The Mule, and Unforgiven, of course. And I just think his style is very, the tone that he brings to the films is very heavy-handed.
Yes. So,
first of all, I hated this movie the moment it starts, and you've got Clint Eastwood as this. Basically, his entire motivation is to growl, or that's his defining character trait.
So much growling. I watched this movie with subtitles on because at the very beginning the audio mix was so muddy. I was like, I can't handle this the whole movie, and just the amount of growl subtitles that showed up throughout this thing baffled me.
That's how he's introduced. He's at a funeral for his dead wife, and rather than mourning or showing any, the only emotion that he shows is disdain for his grandchildren, right, who are showing up in a sports jersey, and one's got showing her midriff and has a belly button piercing, and one does the spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch.
Right.
Thing. And you're okay, so he hates everyone. He hates everyone. No one can live up to his standards. Unless they're behaving exactly like he wants them to, fuck them.
Yeah, he hates the priests. He hates his family. He hates his neighbors.
Everyone. And that's the kind of heavy-handedness with which Clint Eastwood draws his characters. Everything's very morally black and white. Characters are either good or bad. And this character is extremely judgmental. And he, Eastwood always leads with very American values: pride, military service, stoicism, honor, respect, discipline, faith. He's very, very old-fashioned. And when you boil this movie down, it's essentially a character study, whereas his other movies are there's a stronger narrative thrust. whether it's like whether it's revenge or like an investigation or like drug running or something like that.
Right.
This movie is basically a character study, and this character fucking sucks.
Yeah. he's an ornery old son of a bitch. The thing with Clint Eastwood in this movie, and I will say this about Clint Eastwood movies sort of in general, I have never seen old Clint Eastwood, either his work as a director or an actor. I haven't seen, like, even back going like to Dirty Harry days. I think the oldest Clint Eastwood movie I've seen now is this. Because I watched Invictus when it came out in theaters, because it was the movie that was the Oscar bait at the time, and I was like getting into Oscar baity stuff at that point in my life. And there was I did an episode about not 3:10 to Yuma, the Paris movie.
Oh, 1517 to Paris.
1517 to Paris. Yeah. And that movie, I don't know if you've seen that, but oh man, I mean, it's got all of the Clint Eastwood heavy-handedness and gray film overtones, but with none of the actual good acting that Clint Eastwood can evoke from his actors. Because that's the thing. There's a problem that I ran into with this movie where so many of the people who are acting in it are clearly phoning it in, or Clint Eastwood didn't take the time to direct them, which is, I think that's based on the stories you hear about Clint Eastwood's directorial style. You know, he's one and done. We get out of there. So you have to be a good actor in order to get something from latter day Clint Eastwood, and be, you know, worth your salt at all. But I can't imagine what his earlier work would be like, because I'm just like wrapped up in this modern day version of him where I'm just like, he's the only person who's directing and acting himself. So he's the only person who's giving anything any sort of life or gravitas. And then he's just playing a deliberately unlikable character this entire movie, right? Like there's no one, like in The Mule, at least he's got just this sort of, he's got some levity to him.
Yes. And he's got Bradley Cooper there, who's fun. Yeah. You know, like that he's definitely having some fun with that character. And Bradley Cooper has like huge admiration for Clint, so you know he was showing up for that. Right. But yeah, the acting in this movie is really, really bad. Yeah. The writing's not great to start, because it's all in service of like some very, very backwards ideas and politics, which we'll get to. But you have some pretty some actual actors surrounding him, like that are playing his kids or his grandkids, and then you've got what I remember when the film came out was that he had cast non-actors in this film. So these are authentic Hmong American actors playing the family next door, which I applaud. Like that he didn't cast, you know, Koreans to play this or Chinese or Japanese or whatever, that he did cast authentically Hmong Americans. But when you combine bad writing with Eastwood's directing style, which is like one or two takes and then move on, with non-acting, you just have, it's a recipe for just like horrendous performances. Yeah. You know, and you see that in Tao and Sue are okay. It's Sue, right? By the way, let me just pause for a second. Yes, Sue. Mm-hmm. Okay. Tao and Sue are okay, and they get the most to do. But then you have the Hmong gang and Spider, who like their entire behavior is just to like push each other around, and like there's just absolutely no depth to them. All the gang stuff is horrible. Like Eastwood like half watched Boys in the Hood 20 years before this and was like, I got it. I figured this out. I know exactly. Sure. I know how gangs in the inner city behave. I got it. Right. And to add to it, he was like, my son, Scott, you're going to play the white guy who wants to be a black guy, and you're going to pull it off because I know I can trust you to do that. That was him. Yeah. That was him. That's right. Okay. Got it. Scott Eastwood, baby. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Terrible. So bad. But like the Latin gang shows up. They're just there to harass Tao. They never show up again. Right. The group of black guys are just there, like, drinking on the street corner. They're there to harass Sue. They never show up again. Right. And the Hmong and the Latin gangs are both just, like, they're shown in the exact same way. Like, they're both just obsessed with cars, guns, terrible music, yelling over each other, swinging their dicks, and it's all just so obvious and lazy. And as is so much of this movie, I think.
Right. It's very like Boomer Plus. Like, this is not a movie. This is a movie made to perpetuate. I don't know about made to perpetuate stereotypes. I don't know about that. I don't want to put that kind of agenda on this, but I will say it does not do anything to really change stereotypes. Because, like, even Clint Eastwood's character, who does grow over the course of the movie, and like,
I don't know about that, but go on.
I think he develops. He doesn't grow like super morally, but he develops a better understanding. And despite that, he is still using racial slurs the whole time. He is like, he doesn't change his actual behavior. He just adapts what he does to finally like show that he's developed a love for a family, even though he doesn't love his own family. He's gonna take Tao to be under his wing and Sue to be under his wing, and show the care that he cannot show for his own family, even though he's still calling them every racial slur in the book. in the meantime,
but think about it in terms of this: what it takes them to earn that from him. That's the problematic part of this, which is the only way he connects with Sue is because Sue doesn't take his shit.
Yeah.
Sue gets in he like saves Sue from this group of like stereotypical harassing, like degenerate black men that he sees on the street, which I don't even know.
In the dialogue, she's even like, everything you're doing is a stereotype. She calls it out. Right.
She calls it out, but she still likes him for some reason, which is bonkers. But it takes Tao, like, basically being like an indentured servant for Walt, for we keep referring to him as Eastwood, but Walt. Yeah. I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is Clint Eastwood in this movie. Like, I don't think this is a stretch for his character.
Right, that's kind of what Clint Eastwood does, where he, at this point in his career, he's just being Clint Eastwood in various shades. Right.
And so it takes Tao working for this guy and doing everything he says, including like learning from Walt how to quote unquote like be a man. And we can not just, so this isn't just like politics and race and everything. It's also like masculinity, in terms of the whole conversation about like Boomer Plus ideals, as you mentioned. That's what it takes for Walt to be like, you guys are all right. You finally met me on my level, so now I can treat you like human beings.
Right.
You know, it's not me coming out of my isolation. You have to get on my lawn.
Yes, I need you to meet me where I'm at, which is on my lawn. And also I need you to bring me a whole bunch of Hmong food.
Yes.
and avoid my protests as much as you can.
When I rewatched it, so I watched it twice. The first time being like, wow, this movie sucks. I got to talk about it. And then the second to like write up all my notes about why I fucking hate it so much. It really is like he only values people to the point of like a transactional relationship. Like, I'm only going to treat you like people if you're going to keep bringing me food. I'm only going to spend time with you if you're working for me. Right. You know,
if you're fixing my car, or if you're fixing up the house across the street, that's the only time you have value.
Right. Which is in conversation with the ideas about masculinity that this is portraying. And now we can talk about like the politics of this movie, because like, I don't see how you can avoid talking about politics when it comes to a Clint Eastwood movie, especially this Clint Eastwood movie.
Clint Eastwood is, no matter what he does, in the late stage Clint Eastwood and all the stuff I've seen, he's a political filmmaker.
Yeah, and he's a political persona. I mean, he showed up at the Republican National Convention 4 years after this movie came out, talking to Obama sitting in an empty chair. Yeah, very, very famous moment. And then in 2016, I I can't remember if he had a movie coming out or what, but I looked this up and he was like, yeah, I'll probably vote for Trump. And that's not surprising. Like, if this movie were to come out, 4 years ago or now, Walt is definitely a Trump voter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Especially a Trump, because he's got all the trappings of it. He's a former auto worker, a veteran, and he's living in the Rust Belt in destroyed Detroit suburbs, right? So he's got all the hallmarks of the guy who hears Trump say he's going to bring back jobs to Michigan and bring back these auto jobs. And plus he's probably going to hit the immigrant dog whistle stuff too. He's going to be freaked out about that. And then, take it to the ballot box and then you're good to go.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the foreign invaders coming into this American small town, right?
Oh,
which I think is such it's a sort of another very obvious touch that this movie does, which is you notice that. Where did I write this down? Oh yeah, there it is.
Right there, right
there in front of me.
Clint Eastwood is being racist part.
Yeah.
The outline.
It needed its own section. But you see, like, the changing American landscape as here is Walt's home, the nicest home on the block, the only home that still has a white person in it. That he maintains his own home, right? So he's taking ownership over his land. He's keeping it up, making it look nice.
He's mowing his lawn with the old school lawnmower.
Right? Manual labor. Right? None of this automatic shit. None of this newfangled technology.
Pulls himself up by his bootstraps. Doesn't need to even cry at his wife's funeral.
Plus, his is the only house with an American flag.
Oh, I didn't notice that. I mean, that makes sense.
I mean, the American flag is, like, very prominently featured, but then there are a few shots you can see the rest of the neighborhood. No American flags. So it's very obvious that it's like, okay, so a lack of value for America or for American values means that means a lack of value for the neighborhood itself. Right. Everything's going to fall into disrepair. That because the environment, the neighborhood is changing, it's changing for the worse because there are foreigners moving in and and real Americans moving out.
Right, which is always the thing that's the thing that white people who live in suburbs are always the most afraid of. I remember, so I grew up in Texas. I grew up in the suburbs of Texas, and there was a news clip that was very, I guess viral is probably the right word, from earlier this summer, where it was a woman from a couple of cities over from me, but still in the same, like, Dallas-Fort Worth area, was saying, basically, hey, I don't want people who are disadvantaged and minorities to live in my neighborhood because I don't know what's going to happen to the property values or whatever. But it's basically, she says it as explicitly as she can without going into Eastwood style racial slur dropping. But that's the way. But that's the politics that Eastwood has in this movie. That's what he pushes. In his filmmaking, he is the person who's showing patriotism as a very specific kind of expression, when that's not what patriotism really ultimately should be.
Right. And you were talking about him growing over the course of the film, like these values that he espouses, that he lives by, those things are never challenged.
Right.
It's just his own kind of isolationism, or like, now because these people were so kind to me, I need to be kind to them. And that means, like, sacrificing myself. Like, that's the only way that, that I can help them. Not by, I don't know, being less racist or working with the police or, like, making sure that the whole neighborhood is taken care of. But it's just this one family. Right. And making sure that this gang goes to jail.
But hey, he also helped out that one little girl's grandpa. Don't forget, they got rid of the wasp nest. So it is at least one other person.
That's right. Oh, wasps. Right?
Oh.
Was that like a...
Nah, I don't know. Get rid of this wasp nest. Get rid of this wasp nest of people from this neighborhood. You got to put more wasps back in. That's what I say. I'm Clint Eastwood.
And then in terms of masculinity, like so a lot of this movie hinges on the relationship that he builds with Tao, this kid who tries stealing his car as like a gang initiation, which I want to briefly talk about as just the worst attempt to steal a car in the history of stealing cars, and certainly in the history of stealing cars on film. The scene previous to when Tao goes to steal the car,
right?
Walt is out drinking with his buddies, telling racist jokes, talking shit to the priest who comes to try to like, yeah. That would be a perfect time to steal a car, right? While Walt is visibly not home.
Yeah.
And yet, they wait until the middle of the night when Walt is obviously at home in bed asleep. This is the perfect time to steal the car.
Oh yeah. Listen, he's an old man. He can't do anything.
but Tao already like talked to Walt. Like he already knows that he's like an ornery son of a bitch, like telling him to like get the fuck out because he asked for the jumper cables earlier.
Right.
You know? So Tao goes to work for him, also as like a thank you to like saving him. I'm going to put that in quotes, saving him from the gang, because that wasn't his intention. Like he comes out on the lawn, like the fight spills over onto the lawn, and that's why he comes out with the gun. It wasn't like, hey gang, stop mistreating these people. It was all of you fuckers, get the fuck off my lawn.
Right.
Don't interact with me. Like stay on your side of the the fence, right?
Yes.
Or the wall, sorry, build that wall. And throughout their relationship, again, I'll put relationship in quotes as well, throughout their transaction of Tao working for Walt, he's like, this is how you be a man. You work with your hands, you do as you're told, and the only ways to like interact with other men is through more epithets, through complaining about your wife, through complaining about your job, through complaining about like the fucking mechanics, like doing shit to your car. It's like, is this what guys talk about?
That's that locker room talk. That's all it is. But I remember that scene, or the two scenes back to back where he takes Tao to the barbershop and he has that whole scene with John Carroll Lynch as the barber. And then they follow it up by going to the construction site. And here's the thing with those scenes is like, the ideas are so ridiculous that I couldn't help but laugh, because it felt like more than the whole rest of the movie, it was actually being played for comedy. And this is an interesting thing that I wanted to bring up, which is the fact that this movie was written by a comedy writer. I don't know if you know I didn't know about this at all, but there's a show that was on Comedy Central way back in like the early 2000s that I guess was something that had started in Michigan or in the area, I think maybe Minnesota. And it was broadcast called Let's Bowl. And there was a guy who was a writer on that, who ultimately wrote this movie, Nick Schenk. So Minneapolis, and he wrote a movie. Gran Torino was optioned in 2007. Clint Eastwood read it and insisted that not a single word of the script be changed by the studio. So this movie was written by a comedy writer who wrote it. I don't think he had Clint Eastwood in mind. I think that Clint Eastwood just found the script and liked it. So that means there's a white guy out there who just wrote a movie that's full of all of the most obvious, blatant, horrible racial stereotypes possible. And a white guy writing down all the epithets that he can come think of, all the slurs he can think of. He's got them in there. And just hoping and praying that someday another very conservative actor will come along and pick the script up. Because otherwise it's just going to be collecting dust.
Well, you have me thinking, if he was a comedy writer, like, was this movie intended to be ironic? or like self-aware, and Clint Eastwood lacks that self-awareness, much as his character does in this movie, that he reads the script and he's like, this is like, you know, boomer, yeah, like you said, boomer, boomer gold, boomer like catnip. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah,
it's boomer catnip.
Boomer catnip. Whereas the writer probably wrote this as being like, no, I'm making fun of you and you don't get it.
But so he also wrote The Mule and he wrote The Judge. So I think that Nick Schenk maybe is just in the business now of writing boomer catnip. I mean, he's 54, right? So he wrote this. He at the time that this movie came out, he was in his, I'm bad at math, early 40s, late 30s. At the time he wrote that, maybe he was a little bit younger than that. So he's just an old soul in like the bad way of being an old soul, I think. And maybe it was ironic, because I do think there are parts in this movie that, like, oddly enough, feel right comedically. Like they have good comedic beats to them. And Clint Eastwood growling the whole time it's funny. And the scene, like at the very beginning of the movie, when he is in the garage with his granddaughter, and he catches her smoking, and she's just like, hey, grandpa, it'd be cool to like have this couch or this car. Like, I don't have any furniture for my dorm room. I'm going to state next year. I could use some stuff. It's funny, but it's like, it's hard to tell the line for me, whether it's funny because it's bad and poorly acted or funny on purpose, which is it's the only reason I think that there's even a distinction. There's finding out that this movie was written by a comedy writer. Right.
It's also on the nose.
Yeah.
Like that moment of her being so out of touch with like with emotionally the moment of when she's in the garage talking to him. It's right after her grandmother's funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And she's smoking. She's like, so what are you going to do with the car after you die? And just says it so like offhandedly that you're like, wait,
right.
What? Like, it's all coming from this perspective of literally in the movie, Walt says, where is it? Where I wrote this down. It's up here. Literally in the movie, Walt says, what is it with kids nowadays?
Oh, some Bye Bye Birdie shit.
It's right there in the movie.
There's so much in this movie where it's him acting in ways that don't. Oh God, he's just a man stuck. He's stuck in time. He's a fossil. He's a boomer, man. But this is. This actually is a great time for me to ask this. What do you think about Eastwood's performance in this movie? Because a lot of the movie has terrible acting. Eastwood in this movie, at least for me, there were times when I was really appreciative of his performance, and other times where I was like, oh, you're phoning it in just as much as all the rest of these people. What did you think about it?
I would call it committed. So, like, regardless of how we feel about the values that this movie is putting forth, and I think we both agree that it has some very borderline dangerous things to say.
Oh, yes.
He is committed. And it is definitely like, I think this performance is better than what I saw him do in $1 Million Baby. It's better than his performance in The Mule, although the Mule did have some levity to it, which was appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason that the get off my lawn growl became a thing, became like a meme before memes even were
really a thing
in our parlance. Yeah. It's a good performance it's hard to reckon those two things. This is also a very well edited movie. It's a very good looking movie. I like the score.
It does do the things visually that I hate, where it's all the same color palette and I feel like it's hard to make a visually striking movie about Detroit, which is just, that's the downside to making a movie that's set in Detroit. The score was good. I think this probably wasn't helped by the fact that I watched it with subtitles on. But so the original song for this movie, called Gran Torino, that eventually you get the remix version in the end credits for Clint Eastwood is dropping a verse.
Nominated for a Golden Globe.
Yes. And thank graciously not nominated for an Oscar. No, this movie got completely shut out at the Oscars. Didn't get nominated for a dang thing.
Yeah.
But the scene, the first time it showed up, the first time the song happens, when it's this montage of Tao doing all this work, and he's like working in the rain with no rain protection. He's like trying to dig up a dead tree. And this, all of a sudden, this soft, tinkly music sort of comes in. These strings, these like Gustavo Santaolalla, like guitar strings come on, and then all of a sudden, it's the subtitles popped up with the great lyrics: la 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 dee 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 da 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 da, and that's most of the lyrics to the hit single "Gran Torino" from the movie Gran Torino.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood should not sing. I don't think anyone was pushing for his like solo album, so I don't know why he decided to.
He's no Jeremy Renner. We'll give him that.
No Bruce Willis, right?
Oh, absolutely not. Okay. So this movie, it did win some awards, right? It got nominated. It was picked as one of the 10 best films in 2008 by AFI. Clint Eastwood won Best Actor from the National Board of Review, and a couple other movie stuff. The screenplay won Best Original Screenplay at the National Board of Review. Gran Torino got nominated for a Golden Globe. Totally shut out at the Oscars. And it, amazingly enough, got a very good score critically from a bunch of boomer critics, I would assume. You know,
and probably white as well. Let's not forget about that. I mean, the racial makeup of film criticism is pretty skewed.
Yeah, and especially if you look at the Asian American community and the Hmong community specifically response to this movie. The casting of Hmong actors was well received, but there's a lot of cultural inaccuracies that are thrown in there, and
shocking.
Surprise, right? I was really ticked off, honestly, by the fact that all of the scenes where the Hmong families are speaking in Hmong language, none of it is subtitled. I want to see a little, like, I just want to know what is actually being said. Like, I understand there's some tonal stuff, and they're probably doing that to try and get you in Clint Eastwood's character's head a little bit more, trying to get you in Walt's head where he doesn't know what's going on. But I want to know, like, there's this culture that I don't know anything about. And they're showing these cultural, there's the shaman that came in that was an actual Hmong shaman, and they're doing these tea ceremonies and this some sort of like a birth ceremony of some kind, and I want to know what's happening. I don't want to be an outsider on that. Like, just give me the little niblets, Clint.
Yeah, well, especially because those scenes are not seen through Walt's perspective. Like, he's not in the room when they're doing these things. So if you're going to have your movie be entirely like centered on this character, on Walt, but then have scenes where Walt's not present, like, you got to give the audience something. You gotta.
Have you ever, by the way, this is a total tangent, but have you ever watched a movie that was supposed to have, like, a foreign film maybe, or a movie that had scenes in a different language where you only found out after the fact that it was supposed to have subtitles?
No.
Like,
I don't know.
So, okay, so I know people who download movies from the internet from time to time. And this happened with John Wick 2. And there's some scenes. Have you seen John Wick 2?
Yeah, okay. Recently. I saw it like right at the beginning of lockdown.
Right. So there's very stylized subtitles throughout the whole John Wick franchise anytime somebody's speaking in a foreign language.
Which is a lot.
Yes, especially in 2. There's a lot in 2. It's chock full of people speaking like Italian and French and Russian. And I watched it for the first time. The file I had did not have the subtitles baked in because it's a very specific stylized subtitle format.
Right.
So I started watching it, and I was like, okay, you know, I'm going to follow along. I'll figure out what's going on. Maybe this is just like a choice that they've made. And then I fell asleep because I just couldn't keep up. It was too late at night. And then later on, I was like, hey, is there like a problem? Like, is this a deliberate choice? Like, are they trying to make you really focus in? And then I realized that I just gotten a bum file with no subtitles. So now I'm very wary anytime I watch a movie where someone's speaking a foreign language and there's no subtitles in it.
Because there are subtitles.
There
are subtitles in a couple other places in this movie. Notably, when Walt is sitting on his porch and the old lady next door sits on her porch, mm-hmm. and Walt says to himself, "This lady hates me." Mm-hmm. And then she goes off about, like, why doesn't he, like, all the other Americans have left, like, this old dog is just, like, still kicking around. And she's, like, going off, but, like, Walt wouldn't understand what she's saying, so how does he assume that she hates him? And I think the only reason that line is there and why she's there in that moment and why we're able to see the subtitles is to make us feel better about why he hates her so much.
Right.
Well, if she hates him, then it's okay if he hates her. Even though he would have no basis for knowing how she feels about it.
No, he's just guessing based off of the way of the tone that she takes.
Well, and the way that, and he's projecting. He's like, well, if I hate her, she probably hates me just as much.
Right.
But that's probably not the case.
I've been watching Ted Lasso on Apple TV.
Here, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
It really builds. It really gets you. It's after like episode 2 or 3, you really start to get warmed in the cockles of your soul. But there's a line that Ted has. I think it's like one of the last episodes of the series, where he says he's talking about bullies, right, and people misunderstanding him as a kid. And he has this line where he says, I forget, he's quoting, I think it might be a Walt Whitman quote. He says, you gotta, don't be judgmental, be curious. And all of the problems that I ran into in my life, bullies wise, were because people were judging me instead of wondering and being curious. And that's all Walt does. That's all that anybody of that generation tends to do, is just judge. Nobody's curious. Nobody tries to find out like an actual answer or develop an understanding, because it's very easy when you get to that point in your life to just stay set in your ways and say, fuck the rest.
And not only that, but anybody who's younger than me should exercise effort as much as possible to understand me.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of this like post-election Trumpism is where we're at in the media, being like, no, like these people are inherently good. We just have to like bring them out of their isolation. We have to like go to them and understand them. And I'm like, no, we don't. Mm-hmm. We don't have to do that. So I do want to mention a couple other things that I noticed in the movie.
Hit me.
The worst priest, like the
so
worst,
bad.
just like fucking dumbest, ineffectual, shitty priest.
This guy
he's got that.
Such
shit. I do agree with Walt on one point, which is that opening sermon that he gives at the funeral is fucking dog shit. But
yes.
like, death is for us Catholics is bittersweet, bitter in the whatever, and sweet in the salvation or the whatever. And it's like it's dog shit. We know that. But then he has a couple other lines later in the movie. He's sitting with Walt at the bar at the VFW. He says, "I'd like to think I know a lot about life and death. I'm a priest." Mm-hmm. It's just like another very like textual, obvious, like on the nose line, like doing a lot of exposition right there.
Right.
And then I only heard this on the second rewatch, and I was like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. he says after the whole like lawn incident, the priest shows up on Walt's door being like, why didn't you call the cops? I do some work with the Hmong gangs. What? In what world does this pasty-ass Wonder Bread motherfucker work with some of the Hmong gangs?
There's no way.
Get the fuck out of here.
Absolutely not. Also, the priest, my favorite part of the movie with the priest was when, so has this confession scene with Walt, and Walt is basically laying out like veiled threats that he's going to take some action. Because the priest is, he's in league with the Hmong gangs. He's talking to him. He's got his ear to the ground. He knows what's going on with this hit that just tried to happen. And so he like chases Walt out, and he's like, you can't do this. What are you going to do? You're going to take retaliation. So then there's the scene, I think it's a couple after that. The next time you see the priest, he's with the, two cops outside of the house, like for protection. And eventually the cops are like, this is bullshit. We can't wait here long enough. And then they perp walk him into the car for no reason. Why? I didn't understand it. It made me laugh in the bad way. I wrote down cops suck, LOL. Mm-hmm. And also, like, if everything that we've seen up until this point, like, about Walt, he should love the cops. Oh, yeah.
Like, I assume that, like, this is the guy who's, like, calling the police every time one of these gangs drives up the street with their loud car.
I feel like at the end of the day, Walt is probably more libertarian than we were giving him credit for. He's clearly got some guns. He's probably got, like, some gold bars buried in the backyard.
He's got a fucking cage on his basement.
Oh, yeah, that's
like,
right. He does have a cage. He's got, yeah.
Walt's definitely got some bodies buried somewhere. For sure. I mean, he admits as much that, about all the people he killed, but, like, he's able to lock Tao in the basement. What the fuck? Mm-hmm. That is chilling. Chilling.
This movie is bananas. And
I think I have to sum it up in this interaction that Sue has with Walt, where Sue's telling him, oh, my dad, our dad was so like he was very hard on us, like super old school, like very traditional, and that was bad. Like that was really hard on us. And Walt says, well, I'm old school. And Sue says, yeah, but you're an American. And Walt says, what's that supposed to mean? And Sue shrugs.
It's so...
and then she changes the subject. It's like, at the end of the day, like, these people don't... Or like, the movie is saying, these people don't know what any of this means. Like, what is the value of being an American? They're just throwing it. Like, for some reason, it's better, I guess. Shrug. Like, what?
But I think the other thing with that interaction as well is that it is so indicative of the fact that this movie does not want to do anything but gloss over the surface. That conversation could have actually developed into something, an exploration of American identity and what it means to be an American, what it means to grow up in America versus being part of an immigrant family. I mean, they're making jokes about old Walt being Polish the whole time too, right? So he's got some immigrant somewhere down the line in him. But instead of taking the chance, the stone skips across the water of this facade of Gran Torino, and God damn it, I wish that this movie actually dove into some stuff instead of just being a shallow stereotype fest.
Yeah. It's also great that this movie would definitely be better, as you said, if at some point any of the things that Walt is doing or saying or the values that he's putting forth are challenged. Right. In some way, or shown to not be true, and like the validity of these ideas is challenged, is that, there's a different way to be a man, that you can like take care of your family and do the dishes and cook meals and do like what they refer to as women's work and still be of value and still be a man, or talk about your feelings, talk about the fact that you're like fucking dying, which Walt never does.
Never does.
But he talks about, cars and his wife and whatever, because that's manly stuff, right? In the end, Walt never suffers any consequences for being an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing he thinks he needs forgiveness for is like the shit he did in the war. So he goes out in a blaze of glory, like he doesn't want to be a hero, like he realizes he's beyond redemption or salvation or whatever, and so he'll sacrifice himself and make sure that these Hmong gangs who are harassing Tao and Sue go to jail. But then he's literally shown in the image of the crucified Jesus on the ground and made out to be a saint. So the film immediately contradicts itself. Like, this guy was an asshole his entire life, but he goes out like a saint. And the other line that the priest says, where did I write this down? Sorry. I know we want to wrap up, right? Who's up top? The line that the priest says at the funeral for Walt is, Walt was never afraid of calling things like he saw it, but he was right. And that encapsulates everything about this movie, that no matter how racist he was, no matter how much of an asshole, no matter how stubborn, no matter how repulsive and disgusted about like the changing neighborhood or whatever, he was right.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck that. And then
fuck that for sure.
And then we get one last racist monologue as Tao drives off into the sunset with the Gran Torino. What the fuck? What the fuck?
That's, well, hey, listen, the lawyer didn't want to say it, but it was just written that way. Clint Eastwood would have taken that will and been like, oh, I'm never changing a word of this. We're leaving this exactly the way it is. This is what America's all about. Yeah.
Just like the script.
Listen, Ben, sometimes I regret watching movies for this podcast. I can't say I regret watching this one, even though it is a not good movie for a number of reasons. But thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Yeah, I think we did a patriotic duty by watching this movie and being aware of just how fucking awful it is.
Right. I think patriotism doesn't have to be nationalism. That's all it is.
No.
Let patriotism, if you're harping on championing the American dream, then let other people live the American dream too. And don't be such a fucking stick in the mud and kicking people off your lawn about it.
100%.
I know you're listening, Clint Eastwood, so do it. Ben, where can the listeners find you and your work and your new podcast if they want to get a listen?
Yeah, well, this was such a great movie to do, also because obviously wrapped up in a lot of American ideas and culture and values. And that is what we're talking about on a new podcast that I co-host called American Scene. You can find us on all the platforms. We're on Twitter at American Scene _. And yeah, please take a listen. So the idea of the podcast is we're talking about movies with the word American in the title, because there are so many of them. Mm-hmm. And, so we talk about what they have to say about American culture and ideas and values. First few episodes are out. Would love you all to take a listen.
Go give it a listen wherever you get podcasts. American Scene. And you can find me at Diet J on Twitter and Instagram, jlightcomedy.com for show dates, both live and live streamed. And if you like the show, please consider subscribing on Patreon to get bonus episodes, bonus access to movie nights, and my film library if you're nasty, if you pay enough. Ben, thanks again.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun.
This is a pleasure. Yeah. And this has been Blockbusting. Go see something good for a change.